As the coronavirus pandemic takes hold, the corporate world takes a turn for the dangerous. Those desperate for survival find they have to resort to methods outside the law. It is a lethal market criminals have begun to take advantage of, as the use of assassinations on rivals becomes fair game. Enter Japanese-born Ishijo Reiko, a bodyguard who hires herself out to the highest bidder. As a former gang member, she knows the ways the underground empire works. She knows how corporate killers operate. And she knows in her line of work it is kill or be killed. Ishijo Reiko thought she was having an out-of-body experience, her dark gray eyes looking at herself accusingly, one hand running through her short black wolf-like bobbed hair, the other hand having warmed the HKMP-5 machine gun she had fired into the head and back of the innocent man she had gunned down. Wiping her face, not wise during these times, she reached a hand to his meager savings, what little money he had. Maybe now you can find some peace. Ishijo Reiko, wake up. Instantly she stirred in her bed, an arm reaching underneath for her gun, a Beretta 45. Quickly, it's important she tried listening for any sign of an intruder, or a threat, when the man yelling stormed into her room. What the? My room. Ichijo hears the frantic tone in his voice, yawns, sits up and stretches. I'm up. Reaching under the bed, she searched for the handgun she carries in case of a threat. What's the big emergency? A spider. Ishijo freezes at the words. Otherwise she doesn't react. I think it's a house spider. You're an arachnophobe and you know what type of spider it is. Ishijo guessed he feared them. It helps control the phobia. Ichijo forgoes the firearm, sliding out of bed. It's bodyguard. Nowhere does it say anything about spiders. Getting to her feet, she added, Let's see it. Ichijo followed the guy's lead to her client's bedroom, where she found the large black arachnid at the other end. Okay, she found herself breathing heavily. Okay, fighting every instinct to flee. She grabbed a newspaper by the side of the bed and moved over to where the spider is. Shit, she whispered. Shit. She smashed the paper against the spider, but it survived the blow. Swatting it several more times, it remained huddled in the corner, staring at her menacingly. Ishijo tries scraping it off the wall, the spider fighting her all the way. Finally, she got it off and quickly stomps on it. Fucking hell, the spider survives even this, and Ishijo keeps stomping it as it crawls away until it finally stops moving. Maybe it was a radioactive spider, like Spider-Man. That's not funny, but she could see her client was scared. You need me to tuck you back in? I don't think I could sleep. Ichijo nodded sympathetically, understanding completely. Okay. 5 minutes later, Ishijo and her client were sitting on the couch, watching TV, making certain to practice social distancing. He would watch a few seconds of what was on before changing channels. The channels changed from basketball, an old broadcast of the Heat and Spurs. If it's not Chicago, it doesn't count, Ichijo commented. The man she was babysitting, bodyguarding, figured she had a point and changed the channel. The TV then showed a blonde girl fighting with someone. Ah, I know this episode. They watched for a few seconds before Ishijo was asked. You ever watched Buffy? Love her to bits. They watch a bit more. Hate what she's put through. Taking into account she had already watched the episode, the man changes channels again, this time to the news. A report covered the president's response to the coronavirus death toll passing the number who died at Normandy. Fox News would treat that as a good thing. Ichijo's client spat, she noticed the deliberately mispronunciation of fox. Why couldn't someone kill the bastard? Wouldn't work. The Japanese woman leaned forward, her dark eyes focused on her client as she explained why. It'll result in civil war. His followers would make the death toll from COVID look like a joke. Leaning forward further, she picked up the pack of smokes on the table, separating the two before tossing one to him. The police, National Guard, they wouldn't be able to cope with it, he guessed. Try best case scenario. Ichijo could see at least some would be going to war with law enforcement and the military, or even them being complicit in the killing. It would be a mass slaughterhouse. You wouldn't approve, I take it? Ichijo shook her head, listening in on the news changing to another report. I don't... Ichijo wanted to hear about the incident. 21-year-old Baker was reportedly stealing from his employers and was released on bail. However, he has not been seen for several months. And he won't be seen again, she said to herself quietly. Fat tub of lard. You say something, Ichijo was asked. Nothing important. Her client disregards it and continues watching. Police have begun questioning previous employees as to his whereabouts. Under 10 feet of sand at low tide, she said quietly. Further charges to be laid against him. He won't be around to answer them. And why he might have disappeared. Because one of their previously employees wanted him gone. It was strange for someone to be up and about this late, Reiko thought, despite her having gone outside herself as she did not like to smoke indoors. Yet it was past 1 a.m. Chicago time, her puffing away, trying to explain to someone over Facebook how justice was more important than accepting $500,000 in settlement, when she heard voices coming up the stairwell. She lives alone, Ichijo heard from one of them, and for some reason she could not discern it bothered her, slipping back into her apartment before she would be noticed. Throwing the cigarette off the side of the building, Reiko wondered if the smoke would be noticeable. She listened from the door. Can't believe she lives that way, the other male said. You sure? That's what we were told. And Reiko knew who they were talking about. The girl would do nothing to defend herself, and she knew she had to do something. It was drastic, she knew, and highly illegal, and no profit in it. But all Ichijo could think of is hoping the girl would not think badly of her for what she needed to do. Good thing there's no security cameras. Even so, Reiko grabbed a sports hoodie before stepping out, pulling it over her head, certain none of her neighbors would be up this late but not wanting to take any chances. The girl lived 2 floors up, a creepy shut-in, her living conditions a dump, Reiko thinking as she took the stairs as quickly and quietly as she could how much she hated the idea of anyone living in such squalor, but something about the girl, her antisocial behavior perhaps, deterred anyone from helping. In fact, Reiko likened the girl to a Onryo, like the ghost girl from The Ring. But at least there was one way Reiko could help now. See, I told you. She could hear them from behind the wall at the end of the hall, wishing there was a way to look round without being spotted. Reiko knew after a moment she had to chance it, and thinking enough time had passed, snuck a peek, one of the young men having entered, the other pausing to make certain the coast was clear, and Ichijo pulled back. This was enough for her to draw her Beretta with silencer attached, hoping its appearance alone would be enough. Counting backwards from 30, Reiko thought enough time before creeping down the hall, hiding the firearm she held in hand behind her leg. Finding they had closed the door tight, Reiko as quietly as she could tested the handle, finding it locked. The 2 men may already know of her presence, so Reiko made the decision to shoulder barge the apartment door, bringing the automatic up as the lock busted and she entered, bringing the sights up at the most aware of the 3 targets. "Shit," the individual yelped, Reiko pointing from one target to the other and back again. "Put that away," the other pleaded on, realizing what was going on. "That scares me." "Then shut up." By now the girl had stirred in her bed, and taking in her apartment, Ichijo realized how unprepared she was for its disrepair and tried to push past the shock. "You grab the pillows and peel the cases off," she ordered, thinking to use them as gags. When the girl didn't react, Reiko looked and found they were bare. Clothes, ties, anything you can think of to tie them. Reiko did realize one of the guys might try and grab the girl, resulting in a hostage situation, and shook the firearm at them as a warning not to make any sudden moves. "Now," she growled. "Please," the older looking of the two said. "Don't." "Do as I say," Reiko told them. "And I won't have to." Out of her peripheral vision, she noticed the girl had gathered up bandages from the ground. "Good, leave them there." Ichijo moved to her. "Take the gun. It's okay, take it." She held it so the girl only had to close her hands around it while keeping it aimed at the men, which she did so. Then the quieter of the two tried to make a run for it, charging at the girl, and Reiko responded by stepping in front of her, grabbing the young man as he was in reach, and directing him into the bedside dresser, stunning him. "Keep the gun on the other one," Ichijo ordered. Spotting the glass next to the bed and picking it up, she smashed it into the side of the guy's face, and his shock at what she did she used as a distraction from fleeing, from what he and his friend were going to do, and grabbed the bandages. "Press that against your head," Reiko ordered, glancing at the other one. "Just let us go," he begged. Reiko thought maybe he was trying to convince the girl. "I will." She pushed the guy she injured on the bed, ignoring his protests, and used the remaining bandage to bind his hands. "Stay put, both of you." It occurred to Reiko the girl had not said one word. "Hey, stay with me," she told her, before walking up to the rapist. Nighty-night. One punch was enough to put him down, with her thinking how they were willing to prey on a defenseless girl, but were scared when someone tried to fight back. Hearing a groan, Ichijo saw the other young man wasn't going anywhere either. "Why are you helping me?" the girl asked, speaking for the first time. The answer, Reiko thought, was obvious. They were going to rape her. As she read it, Reiko firmly believed that was their motive. Instead, she played it cool. "No special reason." She took the Beretta back from the girl's unresisting hands, before going to check on who she knocked cold for a phone. "I'm ringing the police. You're going to tell them who you are and what you're doing here." "Like hell I am." In a flash, Reiko had the automatic pressed against his head. "Could you repeat that?" Here, Reiko noticed to her surprise the girl offer her phone. The phone being a low-grade one with no bells or whistles was less of a surprise. "Thank you." She dialed 911. Her thought in this case they would do the right thing. Talk. Reiko was feeling out of place being on the open road, the Chicago freeway as empty as it was during the pandemic. As much as she liked the Mitsubishi Eclipse, Reiko knew there were much better cars out and about, like the RS4 she was currently driving to her meeting with another prospective client. With the highway nearly empty, Maiko Kenfield blaring on the CD player, her focus on the road speeding past, her mind began to drift to how all this began when she was a girl, her father having a strong moral code, a sense of justice he tried to teach her despite his criminal activities. Except this was street racing, motorsport, like she enjoyed. But he was also a realist, and before he died in a botched police raid, taught her firearms, methods of self-defense, skills she employed to protect people or kill them if the price was right. Or the contract, or simply because she thought it necessary. The criminal element she often had encountered in these jobs bothered her no end, but it was a means of making money for her, and believed if a criminal was stopped, then it was a good cause. More troubling was when she was asked to deal with a witness, or a cop, which was how the contracts began, with people trying to hire her for such jobs, test her loyalty, Reiko guessed. She explained to the people who asked her, much like the idea of killing the president, how it would only make the problem so much worse. A witness to a crime ended up dead, so she explained, or a police officer investigating a case ends up dead, she told them, would only redouble their efforts, and this was enough to convince at least some who wanted to hire her she had her head screwed on straight. The rest just wanted their deaths. At least the person she was seeing seemed like the type who understood, Reiko thought, and wanted to meet out in the open, at a coffee shop operating despite the pandemic. Son of a bitch. To her surprise, they were actually open, and there were customers even with the severe restrictions during the quarantine. She knew she was early, and after finding a place to park close by slipped her mask on, thinking if she was going to do this, then at least she could do the right thing by protecting others. Plus it upset the people opposing the wearing of masks. Instead of giving in to the temptation of complaining about it, Reiko made her way in, looking about and seeing Mathis had not arrived yet, a relatively new client. She knew he worked for some criminal operation, she just did not have him pegged. Pulling up at a table, she thought over what she knew, which was not much. Mathis told her they needed to talk. There was a job he had on offer, and he wanted to talk face to face. Out in the open, he wouldn't go into any more detail over the phone, which was sensible, Ichijo knew. Not everyone did, she knew, and they were the ones to avoid, they were the ones who got caught. Would you like a menu? She was asked, Reiko looking up to see a waiter. No, she answered. Not hungry. Orange juice, please, French if you have it the way it was made there. Reiko liked the taste. Meeting someone, I'll get him what he wants when there. She waved Mathis over on seeing him. On second thought, let's see that menu. I'll also take a coffee, please, white, very strong, very sweet. 2 shots, the waiter asked. Make it 3. So much coffee, caffeine would probably upset her stomach, but she wanted to be awake and alert, glancing at the menu she was given. Mathis pulled up a seat as the waiter left. Is that wise? He asked quietly, worried about drawing attention to themselves. Police have certain hiring practices, meant to anyway. She nodded towards the waiter. I highly doubt he qualified. She slid the menu over. What are you having? Instead of answering, Mathis slipped a photo from his pocket. His name's Daniel Hayden. He waited a moment for Reiko to study the photo. I was thinking we could go somewhere more quiet. Ichijo glared at him from behind the face mask. It was his idea to meet here. What's more private than a business that's supposed to be closed during a pandemic? Should we be conducting this out in the open? Mathis asked. Reiko tore her face away from the photograph she was given long enough to give a reassuring look. It's okay. It's not like the police can arrest us on this or anything. Still, she reached underneath the table where they were seated, finding no listening devices before glancing about. They were out of sight of the security cameras Mathis had checked, and seeing no other signs of surveillance, Reiko thought they could relax. So what's this guy's deal? He's stealing money from our business, Mathis explained. Based on that, we need to terminate his employment. Ichijo nodded, taking in the coded language being used. I see if he was committing some type of fraud, then he was probably knowledgeable of the criminal acts the people he worked for were involved in. Do you think he may suspect anything? A plan was forming in her head. He's looked for someone to protect him, we know that much. Mathis paused as their coffee was delivered to their table, rejecting the offer for anything. Ishijo could see he was a little nervous. Well, personal protection for him is certainly a worthwhile idea. Reiko made the comment to show it was okay to discuss the matter, the waiter not paying them or their topic of discussion any mind. Has he found someone? That's why I came to you, Mathis told her. I figured you could take him on as a client. Sipping her coffee, Reiko mulled over the proposition. Of course, she assured him. Once she was certain the waiter was out of earshot, bodyguard work would not be what you have in mind. She said it with a light tone, hoping it would put Mathis at ease. It didn't quite work. You know what's required. We need to make sure he's not going to be a problem. Reiko thought about this. Ordinarily, she would impress upon a client on how serious the idea of assassination was, especially were the idea put to her rather than her suggesting she kill someone as a means of helping. Mathis clearly did not need to be told. In fact, she picked up he was ashamed of wanting to have Daniel Hayden killed. No, she decided when she thought about it. Abashed would be a better way of putting it. He did strike her as embarrassed and thought maybe some reassurance was in order. If he's doing the wrong thing, then something needs to be done about it. And she didn't add it might lead to further work, or a lead on stopping what Mathis was involved in, full stop. My employers know he is and want the problem taken care of, and Reiko knew better than to ask any further. Got a number? She asked. Give him a call, which Mathis did. He knew Daniel and Daniel knew him as someone who could solve his problem. It's me. Have someone who might be able to help you. Reiko wondered if it would come out Daniel already knew her. She was working to protect him as they speak. What's she like? Mathis asked when Daniel said to describe her. You know Rhea Ripley, he told him, referring to the Adelaide pro wrestler. Well, muscular, like her, which was saying something, and Reiko made a mental note there was someone she wanted to check in on at some stage. Really? Mathis asked on Daniel telling him Reiko was already working for him. What do you think of her? As he heard the answer, Mathis pulled out a pen and paper to jot down what was said. She's here now. Would you like to talk to her? Ask if he needs anything, she said, and Mathis waved her off on Daniel, saying he didn't want to bother her. Okay, I'll check in with you later then. Tools of the trade. With the job Ishijo had accepted, she went through the different weapons she liked to use according to her needs. When she could not acquire one she could use, dismantle and dispose of. The Beretta 0845 Cougar was Reiko's weapon of choice that she always carried, a modified .45 caliber automatic. Specifically modified, the Beretta was added to her arsenal specifically because Ishijo identified it as the preferred sidearm of Jill Valentine from the Resident Evil series. Reiko's version she had a gunsmith work in to be as quiet as possible, and she also used a silencer. Much the same could be said of her backup weapon, a Phoenix Arms HP-22. After looking at the Raven Arms Model 25, a favorite of suicide victims for it being cheap due to its poor craftsmanship, to rebuild as a spy gun, Reiko sought out similar models and had this particular weapon essentially rebuilt from the ground up. Thank God for America's gun laws. Reiko was not a member of the NRA, but them allowing her to have pretty much whatever firearm she wanted, as many as she wanted, made her job much easier. Like the Savage Arms Fox Grade A. Ishijo wasn't only being kind when she said about her love of Buffy. Of course she did not believe in vampires, but wanted something she could use if they did exist, deciding on a sawn-off double-barreled shotgun. The wood stock was even worked to a fine point. She never had to use it on vampire or human, but it was there for if she needed it. Finally, there was the Remington M24 sniper rifle, a weapon Reiko was not fond of as a long arm she found too large, clumsy, and its use was for hunting animals, something she found distasteful to the point of wanting to be vegetarian, but she actually liked some of the food. Still, it was there if she needed it, and its legality for hunting allowed her to have it. So the question remained, which was the best tool for the job. Reiko immediately decided against the M24. It would provide a safer way to do the job, but Reiko preferred getting close with the Beretta or shotgun for a sure shot. The HP-22 she thought would be a good choice. Since Daniel Hayden was a client she was protecting, doing away with him, if she indeed chose to go through with it, would be easy. The Phoenix Arm spy gun was likely the best option. Hand him the larger Beretta to protect himself, then when unprepared take him out. If Reiko was indeed prepared to take the job and go through with it. She gave every indication to Mathis on taking the job, and it would be wise not to go back on her word. And that was as far as her train of thought reached when there was a knock at the apartment door, and she called out to wait a minute as she secured the weapons, making sure they were under lock and key. Reiko wondered who it could be. She knew about the other residents who lived there and largely left her alone. Not out of fear or disgust, I hope, she added mentally, believing it a mixture of everyone else being preoccupied and an understanding of leaving her alone, and wondered if maybe it was the girl she helped. Reiko wondered if she gave out such a signal, some subconscious indication of not bothering her, and the idea, well, it bothered her. Reiko didn't have to be all lovey-dovey, but she had standards. More than some vengeful ghost girl at any rate. And was wondering as to who it may be, the idea being the police occurring to her. A quick look through the peephole showed it was Yukiko, another Japanese girl who lived there, a musician, and Karen, a mixed martial artist, and Ashley, a firefighter, and Andy and Tilo and Morgan, and Anderson, and AJ, and several others she didn't recognize. What is this all about now? Genuinely curious, she answered the door. Hello, she said to the group on seeing them in person. Anderson wasted no time in getting to what it was about. We learned about what happened the night before. Since she was being good and civil, Anderson was calm about it before, and Reiko thought about acting coy, blowing them off. Instead, she was straight with them. You mean those two youths who went after Sadako? Reiko didn't think anyone knew who she was. Is she all right? Considering, Reiko wondered if Edward meant given what happened or given she wasn't acting abnormal, or abnormal given her. Point is, we worked out you did something about it, AJ told her, being careful not to say anything he thought might be insensitive. You did a good thing preventing her from being attacked, Ashley told her. You know it, Ichijo asked them. You approved, she thought, whether it said more about them than her. We all got together to discuss it, AJ told her. And from what we know, yes, we did approve. Well, she thought. Isn't that nice? Reiko had to admit she was not sure about her neighbors liking she intervened, but found the fact they did comforting. Then Ashley asked the question she was dreading. Where'd you get the idea from doing that? From my dad, which she guessed was true. Him instilling those morals on her. Tilo spoke up then. We can go over it, maybe look at some way to help the girl if you like. The comforting idea they were okay with her actions gave way to wondering how much they knew, or could guess, about what she did for a living. I were you, I'd keep doing what you're doing. Reiko thought she knew what Anderson was saying. Trying to get involved in helping could mess her mentally, and could the girl maybe be beyond help? She didn't think so. Ichijo knew she was far from qualified, not the person to help in such a way, despite several times being approached on such matters. Speaking of which, she told them, I'm happy to play 20 questions about it, but I'm about to head out to do that. No need for them to know the details. Sorry to be rude. No problems, AJ told her. We're thankful you were there. Reiko, she turned towards the voice and found a figure climbing up onto the steel container she was standing on. Ichijo had met Ken when she was sought out for her knowledge of contract killing, and from there it led to more of a focus on personal protection, something which Reiko was appreciative of, which made Mathis' contract all the more problematic. Killing the man who she was supposed to be protecting placed her in a moral quandary, especially given how she wanted to be loyal. Instead of talking to Ken about it, she offered the Beretta Cougar to fire off some shots at the targets she had set up in this makeshift range. Ken refused the firearm, wanting to discuss what happened at her apartment. Everyone is talking about the girl you saved, Ichijo picked on the concerned tone in the voice. Not sure how that got out, though she suspected the people she lived with had an inkling for a while Reiko did something along those lines for a while. It wasn't until now they had come forward about it. If you're concerned it would draw attention, believe me, it wasn't my idea to let them know. Oh, I get why you did it, Ken told her. In fact, I would have done the same myself. Then Reiko wondered why bring it up. Do you think they might be at risk over what happened? And Reiko thought about it, how her neighbors knew she at least worked to protect people, if not as an actual job, then on principle, which she thought was the best outcome. If the killing for money came out, it would most likely be another matter entirely. Such a revelation would not be expected, nor, she thought to say to Ken, was their reaction. I don't think they are. She paused to check over the Beretta. 2 kids tried to attack a girl and I did something about it. Far as I know, that's as far as it goes. They don't know nothing. She'd have done something about it if there was even the slightest bit of danger. What Reiko wasn't sure, it wasn't like her arming everyone was a practical solution. You'd say if they did suspect anything, Ken pressed. I can send someone over if there's a problem. Ken was something of a philanthropist. Ichijo found, like she tried to be, using the profits from the work she did, especially with Daniel Hayden. How did Reiko began to ask, before thinking of course Ken would know of any threat to a security client. He's involved in some gang, I know that much. Motorcycles, maybe. Even if he is, I don't approve. Reiko figured Ken meant both his criminal ties and the request to kill. He's supposed to be protected regardless. Yeah, I'm with you there, Reiko told Ken, agreeing with the concept. What else you got? We'll both look bad if he ends up dead, Ken warned her. At least like we cannot do the job. Were it me, I'd believe you were involved in killing him were something to happen. I can see why you would think that Shijo said, studying the targets downrange. Least this is a private gig and not one of your contracts. You're missing the point. Doesn't matter, he's not one of my clients. Your actions reflect on me badly if you don't keep your word on protecting him. Reiko didn't respond right away. Ken was forthright and open about the conflict between being a bodyguard and also a hired killer, and didn't mind sharing such views one bit. This was further demonstrated when Reiko pulled herself into a sitting position, legs dangling over the edge of the shipping container, and reached for a beer. Ken's disapproving look at mixing alcohol and shooting said it all. Reiko knew Ken had protected far worse, knowingly, which upset her. Given the choice, she would kill them. Consequences be damned. But she also didn't want to upset someone she respected. Figuring after a moment she did. And it wasn't like she asked to kill people. It was sometimes she thought it necessary. She could respect Ken's wishes to keep him alive at least. You know, you're right, Reiko told Ken. All right, I'll look after him. She indicated for Ken to take a seat next to her. Say you think maybe you can dig up info on him. You don't know. When she shook her head, Ken contemplated the request. On the one hand, it was fair to ask about a client. On the other, it was strange, having known Echijo for some time, she hadn't done the research, or had and not came up with enough information, except knowing Daniel is a criminal. Those kids. Ken wanted to ask, plucking the Beretta from her hand since she was drinking. Did you want to kill them? Those two Nimrods from several nights ago were more of a menace, was Reiko's reply. If you're worried, I'll do something to Daniel. Nimrod's far more of a menace. Reiko didn't get the reference. Did you want to kill them? Reiko knew Ken was concerned about this. Her tone was soft but firm, wanting to convey her earnestness. I never want to kill people, but if it's necessary. Reiko figured it was not what Ken wanted to hear. You're all for personal protection. You know those suitcase machine guns some use. Sure, was the reply, knowing we're a bodyguard to open fire with one they'd take out friendlies. No, I get it, but what I need from you is to be prepared to defend Daniel Hayden. Can you do that? Echijo considered the request. The people after him would be, in all likelihood, also criminal-orientated, and if it came to be hurting people who hurt others in the process of her duties, then she could live with protecting Daniel Hayden. I can do that. On reflex, she reached for a cigarette before thinking it would bother Ken. Okay, you have my word, she said, hoping Ken would deliver on the information. Yeah, I know him, Reiko said. The revelation of what she did, if not what she does, is something of a career, had certainly brought the residents she lived with out of the woodwork. Works government or something, as if E.J. Reiko found out the initials stood for Edward Jackson, expected her to know anything about politics. Someone took a shot at him. Edward had spotted Reiko on her way out to meet with Daniel Hayden, Ken having forwarded details about him, and having heard the news about an assassination attempt on Chicago's Senate nominee in the upcoming election, wanted to get her take on it. Someone doesn't like his politics. No one had come to her about a hit on him. She didn't even know someone wanted him dead, and for EJ to be talking to her about it now made Reiko wonder if he knew or had figured out what she did, and whether to do something about it. Has governing gotten so far? Well, he's been condemned about the number of shootings in Chicago. Black on black. They're trying to make it out more attention should be on that and less on police shooting them. Who's they? Reiko didn't get involved in politics, but the idea of ignoring police murder got her attention. His political opponents. The people voting for the other guy. Reiko wondered for a moment why EJ was telling her this. Then she remembered many years ago, immediately after September 11th, she was pulled up by complete strangers, asking her advice. Even at such a young age, 19 at the time, she was able to give it based on her looking up details of the terrorist attacks like everyone else did. Reiko thought EJ is the same, scared of the attempt on the senator's life, just like the world was back in 2001. Someone takes a shot at the guy because they think he shouldn't be questioning police violence. Echijo thought she understood. I think anyone who knew enough to be able to at least try would know it wouldn't be worth it. You would think. EJ, agreeing with what she said, put her at ease on how much he knew about her operations. It's common sense. Besides which, she added, how does using gun violence make a statement on being against gun control? That should only give argument for it. Sounds like you know quite a bit about it. Reiko quickly gave a reply to EJ's suggestion. Only public knowledge. What everyone would work out. She then gave an example outside of assassination work. They go on about gun-free zones and the like. My knowledge on it is there were school shootings before gun-free zones. Now there's gun-free zones and there's still shootings. It was then Yukiko joined in the discussion. I'm not saying having guns there won't make them soft targets. I don't have the answers. Some think they do. You heard they're finally charging the cop who killed the guy out of state? Yukiko asked. referring to a crash police were involved in after running a red light. Surprising they actually are, as well as being true. Reiko, having no faith in the police taking action on their own, she judged EJ was similarly taking a dim view on the incident. They tried to pretend it didn't happen. Reiko nodded, remembering. Yukiko looked at her for a moment before turning to EJ, who nodded. They were up to something, Reiko thought. The girl you helped. Reiko figured they would want to bring it up, but was surprised by what Yukiko said next. How would you feel about looking after some kids for a few hours? Why, though in a way it made sense, given they liked her method to protect someone, but such tactics with children wouldn't be appropriate. There's a protest we want to be part of, which was why, Ishijo was guessing, they wanted her views on the shootings and the crash. How come? Reiko asked. They're debating whether crippling the economy or some 5 million dead is the preferable outcome with the pandemic. Why you want to put yourself and others at risk? Breonna Taylor, was Yukiko's reply. Breonna Taylor, Reiko repeated. I don't like watching the news, she admitted. It gets distressing. She was killed by police in her sleep, EJ told her. That's why there's protests about it. The police killed her in her sleep, Ichijo had to ask. How'd the police fuck up to such a degree? Wrong address, Yukiko told her. They had a kill order and they got the wrong address. Reiko couldn't believe it. Shifting gears, she thought to bring up. There's a quarantine going on. She then thought it worth asking. You think it's wise I look after them? You saved the girl, Yukiko told her. I'm guessing you don't want to be out and about during the pandemic. Risk getting infected or look after kids. Yes, she did save the girl. How her neighbors believing saving the poor girl from being raped made her the best choice to play babysitter, Reiko wasn't sure. Tough choice. Reiko, Yukiko began before Ichijo stopped her. No, it's the right thing. This is important to you, it was important, full stop. She knew. The last thing Reiko wanted was to appear as some type of zealot on the matter, regardless of her feelings on the police. Ken was true to their word and had sent through information on Daniel, which Reiko began reading through in great detail while he argued on Facebook. Yeah, I'm with him now, she said over the phone, looking up long enough from her research to not like him getting clearly agitated at something he was reading online. On the link to the gang he was involved in, she looked them up, the Motorcycle Riders Affiliation of Illinois, or MORCAI. Now that's a forced abbreviation. I know, Ken told her. Suspected of drug manufacturing, distribution, the article name dropped the investigating officer. See any names you recognize? He was suspected of planting evidence in a bid to make the arrest, but was acquitted, but the information well dried up there. I know this creep. Ichijo tried doing her own research only to come up against a brick wall herself, which suggested someone was trying to keep it all under wraps. Ichijo, Ken began unnecessarily. I know, Reiko had heard it 100 times. Don't go after the cops, they're always right, just ask them, they'll tell you. And even her snide remark, she knew, would be enough to set them off. Deciding it was time to move, Reiko kept Ken on speaker. We have a lead on where Reiko knew Daniel Hayden was obsessing over social media again, him getting upset, what he read upsetting him, bothering her, and snatched the phone from his hand. Hey, he complained, what are you? We have a lead on where the people after you are coming from, Reiko told him. I say we get you out of Chicago while we deal with who's after you. Daniel wanted to ask what lead she had on the people targeting him, but there was a more pressing matter he had to know. What about my ex? He wanted to know. My kids. Reiko had heard him talk about them before, and such reasoning alone was enough. She wanted to side with Ken and protect him rather than Mathis and kill him. You want to know if they are at risk, she guessed. Yes, what happens to them? Do we get them out? Of course, Ichijo quickly agreed. But right now your priority. Daniel shook his head on hearing this, not liking what he was being told. No, I don't agree at all. They have to be taken care of. They will be, Rico promised, but you're the target. You know that. Figuring a distraction might help, she asked. What are you worried about on this thing anyway? Without waiting for an answer, she went to see for herself, and saw it was a YouTube video where some angry old man was going off. Guns. They're saying there's a mass shooting every week in Chicago, Daniel explained. Because we cannot get any type of gun we want, as many as we want. We can go over to Michigan to do that, Ichijo told him, not sure what his position on the issue was. She had a feeling he was going to discuss the matter. Thought there might be some answers there, which didn't exactly answer the question, but at least he wasn't frightened about his family. How can I say this without sounding like a hypocrite? Reiko asked. However you interpret the Constitution, fact remains there is a problem with guns. Is the answer more guns? With a shrug, she realized she didn't have an answer and thought to address it another way. I'm glad I have common sense when it comes to them. Maybe Peter Griffin shouldn't have guns. Reiko nodded slowly after a moment, contemplating someone like him having them. No, she told him flatly. Someone like him should not have guns, and she could have said more, a lot more, on how someone. No, she censored the thought, knowing many would not be responsible. They go on about banning cars because they cause death as justifying guns. Reiko scowled at the comment, but otherwise gave no reaction, instead looking like she was deep in thought at what Daniel suggested. This shocking and brutal murder was captured on video last night. On hearing the television, Reiko turned to look along with Daniel. We warn the following footage may be disturbing to some viewers. And Reiko and Daniel watched what had to be a security camera film someone grabbed by several assailants before someone with a hedge trimmer. Jesus, Reiko agreed with the sentiment, watching darkly. That's the thing I'm scared of, Daniel wasn't ashamed to admit. That could be me, or my family, and it's not like I shouldn't expect this or feel I deserve it on some level, but I want to make sure my kids are safe, and if I disappear or you help me flee, then they. You're rambling, Reiko told him. And you have my assurances you're considered a VIP. Ken leaned on me hard on this. She remembered how Ken was like that, kept wanting her to focus on personal protection, wanting her to teach how an assassin might go after their target so bodyguards can better protect their clients. Most of all, she remembered Ken being there when a drone strike took out a terrorist who tried to use weapons he intended to sell to the government. The threat being essentially a sales pitch after he was told no. We'll get you what you need and out of here, Reiko told him, hoping what she said was enough to keep Daniel from getting worked up about his family moving to get her keys and jacket. Now, Ichijo paused, understanding Daniel was worried about himself and his wife and kids, which was all the more reason why she thought it was wise to ask, get him out of the way where he didn't fret. Yeah, she said calmly, completely serious. Now, I don't sing. After Reiko got Daniel secured in lieu of getting him out of Chicago, Yukiko pulled her up. She knew she was an atrocious musician, enough so to claim not to even do it for fun, but agreed in helping Yukiko just the same. Doesn't matter, she told Ishicho. I wanted to be able to practice. Reiko shrugged, seeing the Japanese girl sling the guitar strap over her shoulder, wondering how a bad singer would help. Besides, I wanted to talk. This the song list? Reiko asked on being handed a piece of paper. She began reading through what Yukiko wanted to practice on. Nickelback, she thought, was an interesting choice. They had good songs, but some hated the band, the lyrics. Papa Roach. Paul Oakenfold. Ishijo tried to find a song she knew the lyrics to. I haven't forgotten what you said. What's on your mind? One of me bandmates, Yukiko told her. He's into some stuff. Reiko acted as if she didn't hear, but when Yukiko was about to ask for her to listen, she nodded. He's into some stuff, Ichijo parroted, thinking it wouldn't be brought up unless it was important. You know, alcohol may be technically a drug, but it's only if he overindulges I'd intervene. Yukiko stared at her for a moment, at first guessing she jumped right to the drug stereotype, then worked out maybe Reiko was trying to get her to open up. Not alcoholic. Ichijo stopped reading the lyrics, waiting for her to elaborate, but Yukiko wondered whether it was a good idea. He's into some stuff. Ichijo guessed she understood Yukiko being coy about it. Well, that narrows it down. You can't maybe be a little more specific? He admitted to me after a particularly bad trip it was marijuana cut with acid. Well, Reiko began, thinking sounding out her reasoning would help, given Yukiko came to her to discuss it. The acid part one would find concerning. From what I know about it, Ishijo knew it was a bad drug, caused people to have bad hallucinations. She also knew, she was certain, Yukiko would never have come to her about it if the guitarist knew Reiko's position on drugs. He went off the deep end on it. When Ichijo wondered why Open Up Yukiko told her, it was only after he hit rock bottom he sought help. He came to you about it, Reiko told her. Seeing Yukiko was pleased about her noting her friend seeked help. You didn't bust him on the drugs. That's a good sign. Any thoughts on what should be done about it? Reiko should have wondered why Yukiko would come to her about it, but decided not to ask. The important thing was getting her and her friend, she guessed, the help they need. Shoot him, shoot his dealer. No way she could suggest such an idea. Even Reiko knew that was going too far. Get him help. She thought maybe it was worth looking at the phone for what help might be available and saw a text from Daniel, fretting on having to wait while Reiko worked on how to get him out. Having made her decision, Ishijo thought it best to make a courtesy call to Mathis before phoning Daniel on a means of helping him flee the city. Look, leave it with me. I might have some idea. She still might try and track down and deal with the dealer. Yukiko definitely didn't need to know. So Yukiko asked her. She seemed to be having second thoughts on sharing and much rather concentrate on practice. Have you thought of a song? Reiko could see she was eager to practice despite the claim of not being good and came up with one idea. Take me out. I know, Reiko told him, opening the trunk. If they can't see you, then there'll be a better chance they won't attack, she tried to explain. Couldn't I wear a wig or something? Hayden complained. Ishijo would have, but the last good one she had for such a purpose her client took off with, and with the pandemic she hadn't treated getting a replacement as priority. Could if I could get one, though she figured it wouldn't explain how she was able to go about the other aspects of her job. What Daniel asked as she paused for a moment. Reiko sensed something was wrong. What she couldn't tell exactly, she chalked it up to experience, and indicated for him to get in. She crouched by the side of the vehicle, cover in case of a gunman. A woman, she thought idly. After a moment, Reiko thought she was being paranoid and moved to close the boot on Daniel. Hold your fire. Reiko withdrew her Beretta, trying to spot the shooter, her other hand reaching to close the trunk when Daniel tried to make a break for it, only to be shot at. Reiko used the opportunity to duck out and take aim, then noticed the uniform the woman was wearing. You're a cop. She pulled the Beretta up. What's this about? Okay, that's far enough. Don't move. Reiko froze, looking for any sign of who spoke out, preparing herself to dive out of the way or reach for her Beretta. In the shadows, she thought she could see someone holding a firearm on her. Ichijo, thinking standing there would give her a free shot, and jumped back behind the vehicle. Ishijo was absolutely not surprised her actions were met with gunfire. He's a criminal. Reiko was sure the woman wasn't a cop. Police don't open fire on suspects. Or they weren't supposed to. Say he is. This man is still under my protection. The officer's weapon didn't waver, which was when Daniel again tried to flee. When she tried to take aim, Reiko used the opportunity to charge. Cannot shoot her, Reiko reasoned. She saw the firearm, a Glock style, draw towards her and got the idea to use her own, and did so before she could change her mind, throwing it in the assailant's face. Before the cop could recover, Reiko has closed the distance and used the distraction to swing out her thick forearm to flatten the would-be assassin. Damn, The woman ducked and shot out a kick aimed for Reiko's knee, and it was only instinct that made Reiko lift the leg so it struck less harmfully on the muscled calf. The police impersonator still had the Glock, trying to aim at her or Daniel Ichijo wasn't sure, but the pain in her leg told her the woman could fight, was dangerous, and had to be taken down now. She closed on the cop, trying to grab the hand holding the Glock, who fought back with another kick while trying to both keep it out of reach and get a beat on Daniel. Reiko accepted she would have to take a few hits, and next time the officer kicked, she grabbed the ankle with one hand, the blow aimed at her sternum, her other hand going for the Glock. Reiko thinking maybe try and make it so the cop was either made to shoot herself while grabbing for control or lose the Glock, but when it was still kept out of reach, Reiko pushed back. Daniel Hayden and his family are off limits, Reiko hissed at the falling assassin, thinking he would be safe and have found time to run away, when the cop aimed at her face and fired as Reiko could grab hold of the wrist that held the weapon. For a second she froze, sure she had been shot, feeling the scorching burn marks of the brass, but not the thud of the bullet. Reiko kept a death grip on the assailant, who began screaming in pain, and Reiko realized the shot hadn't been true and yanked the firearm out of the officer's hands, throwing it away before running to retrieve her own weapon. Even if she were a cop, Reiko thought she would be able to claim self-defense. Then the woman further proved she wasn't by drawing a knife. Stay out of the way, or you die too. Ichijo was certain the police impersonator would want there to be no witnesses, and as the woman charged, she chose to act. As the assailant closed the distance, Reiko withdrew her jacket, wrapping it around her right arm, seeing the cop was intent on killing her, flashing back to the fear she had of police acting as execution squads for years, before bringing the arm up, hoping the padding would be enough to provide some protection. All this took place in the span of a second. As soon as she was in range, the officer lunged with the knife. Reiko responded by leaning in with a headbutt, feeling the knife slice through the jacket and arm, but not, she hoped, causing any major damage. The blow was enough to stun, and Reiko fought through the pain to grab the woman. The fact she was able to suggesting the wound wasn't serious, and lifted her upside down. Matth's comparison of Reiko to Rhea Ripley was an accurate one. Aside from the physical similarities, Ichijo was something of a wrestling fan. Enough of one to study some of the moves and how used improperly could lead to devastating lethal consequences. Which for Reiko was the point. If she was close enough to have to use them, she was too close, but they did have their uses. Particularly one quite aptly named the Tombstone, where she slammed an attacker onto their skull, no doubt the strength and weight of the impact crushing it and breaking their neck. At the last second, Reiko thought even if she wasn't a cop, killing the assailant would not be the smartest move. Adjusting so only the topmost part of the head touched, Reiko dropped down, making sure to protect the assassin's head from minimal damage. The cop, corrupt or criminal impersonating one, Reiko wasn't sure, but was certain she wasn't official, lay motionless on the ground. Somewhat perturbed by how well she fought, Ichijo quickly looked for where the Glock had been knocked to before choosing to disregard it as disposable, not wanting to encounter any more of her ilk. She called out to Daniel, trying to find where he ran to. Not big on ilk. Ichijo let the kids into the store with some of the money Mathis had given her for the job. As the boys and girls ran off, she got the attention of one of the clerks. Give them what they need, everything they need. Watching the kids interact with the emotional support animals she intended to buy them, Reiko could not help but feel a twinge of guilt over how she obtained the money for them. She tried pushing it past, instead concentrating on the children milling about. Real pillar of the community I am, she thought sarcastically, while she was babysitting the kids while their parents attended this protest, and it was something she thought would be a good use of the profits from the job. Reiko wanted to bring the girl too, but somehow thought it wouldn't work. Then Ken entered the store, seeking her out. "Hey," she said to Ken, having a feeling she knew what this was about. "You know Hayden was a client," Ken told her in a measured tone. Ichijo thought Ken would be absolutely livid. Instead, the bodyguard came across as concerned. Maybe, Ishijo reasoned. It was knowledge of being a criminal stopping Ken from being outright hostile. He was a criminal, she tried to argue, but thought it was a weak case. I'll pay out his contract. It's not about the money. Ken looked at the kids with the pets they were picking out. I need to know if it will come back on you. Can the police find out anything? I don't think so, Reiko explained her reasoning. Way I figure whoever wanted Daniel Hayden killed cannot go to the police about it. If it's a criminal dispute, why have them potentially look at their activities? What happened? Reiko didn't answer for a moment, instead watching the children play with the dogs. Ken didn't push, she wasn't known to brush things off, and was patient enough to wait despite the circumstances. He panicked, Reiko tried to explain. The police after him, probably. The police had no reason to come after him, Ken checked. What did he look like? Reiko clarified, Ken nodding at her correction. Shortish, shorter than me anyway, red hair, that sort of bobbed hair. And they're not a cop, Ken clarified despite what Reiko said. She just opened fire, tried to shoot Daniel when he ran and pulled a knife. I'm certain she intended to kill any witnesses, which, it didn't need repeating, meant her. If she's a cop, she's dirty. At least she's alive. Yes, Ken agreed, which is more than can be said of Daniel. Reiko knew Ken was still upset by it. You shouldn't have put him in that situation. I'm astounded you would, and Reiko knew Ken was getting angry, to the point of not listening to reason, though not without cause. I thought he would be safe enough. I armed him and all. Ken seemed to accept her taking responsibility when she added, admission of getting it wrong and wanting to not act at all. Ken couldn't well say not to try and do the right thing, but there was one pressing matter to be addressed. You know, there was a price on his head. Of course Reiko had done the research on the contract. He was freaked by it, and all. Ken looked at the kids playing. You didn't... Reiko cut Ken off there. Of course not, but Ken wasn't sure. Explain this. Reiko shrugged. After saving the girl, the people I live with had become quite friendly. Asked me to babysit while they protest because they liked what I did. Thinking Ken didn't like what she said, Reiko elaborated. I was trying to be nice. Even if Ken didn't like it, at least her motivation could be understandable, if not forgivable. That's the story you're going with. Ken wasn't sure about accepting it. Then, that's what I'll say. Ken was obvious about not liking it. Problem is, Reiko said on Ken's offer, would they listen? I'll try and keep your name out of it, but at the very least we need to let the police know there is someone out there killing criminals. On Reiko's lip, Ken added, someone else. Daniel Hayden's eyes stung from the sun shining through as the boot opened up. As he began to adjust to the light, he thought he could make out Ishijo. Thankful she made him hide. He was less pleased when he noticed her holding a small handgun and was about to ask for an explanation when she waved for him to remain still. Shh, she whispered, closing the lid. He guessed Ishijo was looking out for any sign of the people after him and listened, not hearing any vehicles about. Then, as he felt Reiko climb back in, he had a thought. Maybe she wasn't trying to keep him safe, but ensure there were no witnesses. His hand began searching for something he could use to defend himself. A tire iron, baseball bat, anything. He thought about trying to make a run for it. Then he heard the muffled sound of Reiko getting out, before the boot opened. What's going on? He demanded on seeing her. The psycho with the hedge trimmer. He remembered seeing the report, but wondered why Reiko would bring him out here to do this, fearful. Take the... She handed him the MP22, Daniel seeing she had the Beretta, and took it, trying to work out why now here with him along. Goodwill mission. Figure we have enough time. Now Reiko shrugged. It's on the way. Why not? Daniel was about to give all the reasons why this was a bad idea when he saw said psycho charging at them with an axe, not roaring or yelling like he expected. He figured the assailant was trying to take them by surprise. Reiko held her fire, waiting until he was about to strike to give the best possible chance at a self-defense claim, if she couldn't hold off from shooting the assailant, if there was no other choice. Daniel, however, had no firearms discipline and fired twice, 3 times. Before he emptied the firearm, Reiko closed the distance and fired twice, both headshots, Reiko thinking whether he ran the group on TV, where more of them might be, but more immediately how, if someone needed killing, then do it. No elaborate plans, no drawn-out executions, make it quick, no need to prolong it. In a way, it's a mercy. If they had to die, then get it done. Daniel watched as she checked to make sure the psycho was dead, before she began looking about, maybe for whom he was working with, the shock wearing off. Why'd you hesitate? Daniel thought he was piecing it together. And how did you know where he was when the police didn't? Reiko was about to explain when they both heard screaming from the shed. Villas. His brother, Reiko assumed, and seeing the madness in his eyes as he came running at them with a brush cutter. So insane he was with rage, he hadn't even fired it up, but intended to use the blades to slice them up regardless. Tried to push Daniel towards the Audi for shelter. Seeing Billy's brother had lost all reason if he had any to begin with. Then Daniel squeezed the trigger, firing until the weapon clicked empty. Thankfully it was enough to put him down, a mad dog who had to be put down. Wow, Reiko mused, I gave you one, you took 2. You're greedy. It began to make sense to Daniel. She brought him out here to get him to kill. Daniel interpreted it. Reiko wanted him implicated in their deaths. You fucking traitor. Daniel brought his MP up, not realizing that it was empty, at which point Reiko took aim and fired her own weapon. A single shot high and right from center mass, but from where the bullet struck it had hit a lung. Daniel looking at her in shock as he collapsed, his internal organs filling with blood. Again Reiko could see the mad look, the loss of being able to communicate, reason with him, no means of talking him down, and she acted instinctively, almost without thinking, which extended to reaching for her phone, dialing a number. It's me. Lost the client. She kept her voice as professional, as respectful as possible given the circumstances. Help of a lit stove, which would help cover her tracks. Whatever Reiko did, it had to be done fast.